think it's kind of criminal that it's been less than a month since the new Steven Spinning movie released, and somehow society has moved on from that fact. Like, are you kidding me, guys? The director of Miracle Johnson's hit music video that invented the Miracle Walk, creating a pillar of law this important in the career of one of the greatest artists to ever live, should earn you $1 billion at the box office, with every project you release. Maybe that would be the case if Marjorie didn't accidentally invent taxes, though. But yeah, it's been about a month now since the release of Steven Spielberg, the inventor of the blockbuster's latest entry into his long-running filmography that time and time again proves that Quentin Tarantino is coping hard. And it really doesn't feel like it made much of a splash. Maybe it's because it's the summer and popular movies are coming out left and right, like we jumped straight to Toy Story 5, then Supergirl, and now Minions, I guess. But you'd think a movie that was so hyped up that they did a whole ass countdown just to reveal the title would at least have some staying power among film communities. Actually, the irony of the situation is that the most I saw people talk about Disclosure Day was when we had that woman singing a song entirely in Minionese. And people were using Josh O'Connor as a reaction image saying, I can understand it. And I can't lie, that shit was really funny. I hate when Twitter users are funnier than I am. So I'm taking this as an opportunity to talk about the movie, because that's what I like to do when given the chance. And I was pretty hyped for this movie myself, since I'm always confident in Spielberg delivering on his concepts. Jurassic Park is still one of my all-time favorite movies. I love 3 of the Indiana Jones films and tolerate 1 of them because of the nostalgia it gives me for the Lego game. I really like Jaws, Hook, Twilight Zone, Catch Me If You Can, Minority Report, Jurassic Park 2. And I'm like one of 3 people to exist that doesn't hate Ready Player One. I was a child when I last saw it, so maybe that's why. Anyway, bottom line is, I really like a lot of Spielberg's movies, and I don't really think he's gone off the rails at any point in his career. He's always course-corrected pretty quickly after a commercial or financial underperformance. So I didn't see much of a reason to be worried about it. I can say now, looking back, that the trailers were pretty innocent at first. They didn't reveal too much, and Spielberg promised the third act hadn't been shown in any of them. Sadly, this would change when some promotional art teased the alien design. Why would they do this? Worst of all, one of the coolest shots in the movie, revealing said design, was there also posted online and just soured so many people's thoughts on it. It's such a shame that you had to actively try to avoid spoilers for the movie before it even came out. And not even from the people who saw it in early screenings. But even without spoilers, the movie itself does have some glaring issues. So, Disclosure Day follows Daniel Kellner, played by recent cinema breakout Josh O'Connor, star of Challengers, Wake Up Dead Man, and My Most Insightful Dreams. I'm so glad Challengers got him into the public eye because he eats up every role, and I hope he comes back for more. Daniel is portrayed in a very passive manner. He's not a character who shows excess emotion or seeks action and thrills. It takes a lot of thought and deliberation to understand why a character acts the way they do and to pull it off effectively. But it takes even more to do that for a character with a very unemotive personality, even without worrying about portraying it to the audience. As such, Daniel's character doesn't really feel like the main talking point of the film, but I love his calm and knowledgeable demeanor. I think his relative stability really gives us an emotional anchor throughout the early stages of the film, when things are at the most confusing since we don't have all the puzzle pieces yet. They utilize this very well when everything is laid out and explained, and we start to see Daniel's stoicism unravel as he panics. It's a lovely transition for his character. We start out in an actually pretty interesting place in my opinion, since we're smack dab in the middle of a hostage deal. Daniel is meeting his former employer and CEO of Wardex, the company he worked at, Noah Scanlon, played by Colin Firth. He's taken Daniel's girlfriend, Jane Blankenship, played by Eve Hewson, hostage, and wants Daniel to return what he stole in exchange for their freedom. After a narrow escape and a short amount of time on the run, Daniel lays out the reasoning for his whole operation. He stole CCTV footage of government facilities working with Wardex on inhuman, extraterrestrial test subjects. He was shown them months into his career and couldn't handle the thought of these secrets being kept from the general public. So, he has a simple plan. First, we disclose, then we day. Let's Disclosure Day! Also, Emily Blunt speaks like an alien. Yeah, this is the second protagonist, Margaret Fairchild, a weather woman who popularized the hit Weather Shimmy Dance. She's not enjoying her career too much right now, and is enjoying her relationship with Wyatt Russell even less. Until a cardinal flies into her house at one point, and she starts uncontrollably speaking different languages and reading people's minds. Then speaks alien like I said while on air, so the whole world is very confused. But she starts to get this feeling that guides her. It's a feeling that points towards Daniel Kellner, and tells her she needs to meet him. Margaret works in the first 2 acts as more of an audience stand-in character since she learns everything as we do and is understandably as confused as we likely are. It really feels like this movie starts 10 to 15 minutes into another movie, so it really helps to jump between the guy who knows everything and the girl who knows nothing, as they get closer together in their parallel storylines. And frankly, I do think this still presents some issues. But first, some positives. I really like Josh O'Connor and Emily Blunt as the leading duo. I think both are incredible actors that can definitely carry a blockbuster in their strikingly different performances, as these very different characters really work to set up the grand plan that they're a small part of. The scale of this movie feels so large. It truly builds up Disclosure Day as a huge event that will go down in human history and always be remembered. That works throughout everything. Even the final act, where that intensity is even more heightened as chaos ensues. I think in the build-up and the suspicion when our main characters are on the run, the pacing does drag a little, mainly in the sections with Margaret because she's basically able to talk herself out of every situation thanks to the psychic plot device, and when you look at the movie with a lot of screenwriting lenses, it really does feel like it can be a bit lazy at times. Like, yeah, it works for the movie and doesn't contradict itself as far as I know, but it still feels like, okay, the danger is minimal because of her new psychic ability to always say the right thing. Cool. And that just happens on repeat. Thankfully, Daniel's sections are a lot more interesting to me, and I like his character obviously, but I feel like he really works as an everyman who tries to be the hero. He can be a bit rash and let his love for Jane jeopardize the mission at times, but it makes him more human, which I think is very relevant to the themes of the movie. And speaking of Jane, she's part of some of the best scenes of the entire film. There's a scene where the main bad guy interrogates her for information, and it might be the best sequence in the movie. It's gripping and tense, and you can see all the emotions spread across her face as she tries to resist saying what he wants. She's also formerly religious, which plays into a lot of her character, and she grips a crucifix in her hour of need to try to get some reassurance and help from the only thing she hopes she can rely on, God. But even then, he never comes. Plus, she's actually pretty smart too for realizing that they can interrogate her again whenever they want, so she should tie herself up and not become a threat to Daniel. I like movies with smart protagonists. Sadly, I also like movies with smart antagonists, and I don't think this is one that includes that, at least not consistently. For a movie that reminds me so much of Minority Report, I was very much yearning for the well-implemented pre-crime system that allowed the antagonist to remain a threat throughout the whole movie, because it feels like while Skyline is pretty intimidating on his own, his goons are really lame, and it doesn't get better as the movie goes on. In fact, it might get worse, considering I can forgive them botching a few car chases, but by the end, it's a little ridiculous how incompetent they can be. Also, it's really funny that at some point they asked the guys hunting down Daniel to drive the highest legal speed available. Like, for corrupt government officials hiding historical secrets, it's just funny to think they care so much about not getting in trouble with local police. Like, imagine if Darth Vader was lecturing a fleet of TIE pilots, "Oh, make sure you have your license and registration in your glove box before embarking." I guess isn't the biggest flaw in the movie, but it kinda sucks to not have much tension in the later scenes leading up to, well, Disclosure Day. I also feel like the movie surprisingly gets worse when it starts explaining itself. Like the main characters' backstories and why they are the ones who have to complete this mission, even if their performances are great and they're selling these reactions, it's not particularly interesting to me to have to accept that the events of the movie are happening due to some unseen mastermind that is willing it to be so. It's kind of the same problem as the villain whose plan is always, but I expected this to happen. It's all according to my plan on repeat. It might be logically sound, but it's not exactly satisfying. And speaking of not satisfying, I am not a fan of the alien design in this movie. Spoilers ahead if you haven't seen them yet, but I mean, they're just the generic grey skin, round black eyes, long thin limbs, and spindly fingers alien. I hate how space is such a vast concept with infinite potential for the appearances and designs of its inhabitants, and yet we still just keep making the Space Raiders alien. Also, it doesn't help that the standardized, generic design makes all of the footage we see of them look like a fake CGI video posted on YouTube in 2012 or something. It doesn't feel real, and that makes the emotion and the anticipation of the eventual reveal so much more saturated. I also can't help but feel like the tension really peaked in the second act. While they try to introduce new topics to up the power level of the heroes and their access to tools to help them avoid war decks, it only really amounts to one scene that is pretty cool, but after that we just kind of jump into the plan, which, don't get me wrong, is again grand in scale and exciting, but it doesn't quite hit that feeling of, wow, are they really going to pull this off? Which might just be me metagaming because it's a movie, obviously they're going to pull this off. But the best movies have you seriously questioning yourself on whether the heroes will achieve their goals. Another thing that I'm really not a fan of, is that I've been saying this movie has a grand scale, but at the same time, it feels like the stakes are never really established. Like, we start with a hostage situation, but there's never any real threat because they're not willing to show that they want to harm her. The closest Wardex ever get to silencing Daniel or Margaret is in one of the major chases of the movie and during a pretty good possession scene. Again, props to Eve Hewson for her physical performance here. She's also doing an excellent job in this movie. In fact, I kind of wish she was in it more, but she doesn't really become relevant again after the second act. The last criticism I really have is that the movie just kind of ends. It feels like after such a dramatic event going on, there really should have been some kind of epilogue or a few days later scene that allowed us to see the real consequences of the actions of the heroes and how they changed the world, bettering it for the average Joe. But it doesn't really happen. Any promises of a huge revelation in human history and seeing that happen is sort of thrown away as it's set up before the ending. And I understand that I'm complaining about the movie called Disclosure Day ending right after the day where things get disclosed, but a pretty big thing shows up at the end of the movie that could have left us with some inspiring word or promised a bettering of Earth. And no, we just kind of have to sit with the ramifications of what just happened. I don't know, it doesn't really sit right with me, and I feel like that definitely contributed to how this entire movie is flooded out of people's minds pretty quickly. For what it's worth, I do think Disclosure Day has a good message about empathy and what makes us human, and that we should always be kind to each other because we never know what they're going through. They're our fellow humans and we ought to appreciate them more. We should unite and form relationships and just be good people in the face of adversity and potential horrors beyond our comprehension. Even if it's a little basic for an alien movie. That's kind of just all that I was left with though. There really wasn't much else to grasp onto and leave with it in your mind. And that's coming from someone who likes Danganronpa. At least that game tells you to hold hope in your heart in the face of any kind of despair. But overall, Disclosure Day is such a mixed bag. It had a genius marketing team behind it, amazing lead actors that make up a full and prestigious cast, a director who is clearly capable of making masterpieces, classic or modern, and then there's just so many aspects that feel underbaked or not well thought out. I'm not a screenwriter, and it's definitely better than anything I could ever make, but I just feel like it could have used a bit more discussion in the writer's room, and definitely some better fleshing out of the stakes, the villains, and the third act. It has spectacle, it has tension, it has some really amazing scenes, but as a whole package, it has a lot of problems. Still, the main question is, does it deserve to be forgotten so quickly? And I don't think so. I mean, it's still pretty damn good and deserves some further discussion. I haven't seen anyone talk about the themes, the messaging, or even the parallels to the real world. Fucking Richard Nixon shows up in this movie, and nobody made a joke about it on Twitter. It's insane how it just came and went. I hope that Spielberg at least makes another movie, because after The Fabelmans, his career deserves to go out with a bang. Not a small whoop that nobody paid attention to. So, let's finish off by giving Disclosure Day a 7 out of 10. Would disclose again. And if you don't want Colin Firth poking around in your mind and tormenting you about your past, because he will do that if I ask, which I like that, then I suggest you subscribe. YouTube algorithm isn't very kind to small content creators, and I decided to vary my plans for this channel a lot more. I think I get burned out of just posting my YouTube reviews of new movies, so I've got some rankings, some hopes for upcoming movies, and plenty of other topics in the works. In fact, if you have any ideas, be sure to suggest them in the comments. Like the video if you liked it, and subscribe if you'd like to see more. If not though, that's okay. I just hope to see you in the next one. Until then, take care, and try to stay out of the heat. It's getting a lot worse, and frankly, I think it's going to keep doing that for a while. Stay safe out there, alright? See ya.